Creating a dashboard is not all about visualizing KPIs. It also involves being able to design a masterpiece that speaks and attracts. Hello guys, how are you all doing? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how I built this masterpiece that doesn't only attract but also speaks. So this tutorial will be very beginner friendly. We are going to be starting by how you can import your data set, performing your data modeling, and building an interactive visual where we are also going to be using the WorldMap. And we are going to be covering how to perform a thorough data cleaning using the Power Query editor. After that, we're going to be moving down to how you can actually create your dimensional tables, how you can create your fact tables. We are going to be covering referencing and duplicating in Power BI. From there, we are going to move ahead to performing our data modeling. I'm going to be showing you how duplicates can actually mess up your whole analysis. If you know me very well, you know I don't like the too much talking. Now, enough of the talking, let's get started. But before we hop in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and share. Thank you so much for watching. So this is a dashboard we are going to be recreating. So we are going to be making use of complex DAX functions to actually achieve some functionality in this dashboard. Now, this is the tutorial material for this dashboard. Now, this is the tools we actually use for this dashboard is I made use of Canva, Power BI, and GitHub. Then the tutorial steps is we are going to be performing data cleaning. Secondly, we perform our data modeling and creating our relationships. Then thirdly, we are going to build the dashboard. Then also we are going to be publishing this dashboard. Then lastly, if you will create this dashboard, please give me a shout out on LinkedIn. You can actually find the link to my LinkedIn account on my YouTube description. Additionally, I can also show you my LinkedIn account right here. So this is my LinkedIn account. So if you find this tutorial helpful or if you will create the dashboard, please do it to give me a shout out on LinkedIn. I would really appreciate that to see what you were able to come up with. So these are some complex dash functions we use to actually achieve some functionality in the dashboard. Now this link here is a link that takes you to my GitHub repository on how you can actually download the map file we are going to be using in this tutorial. But everything about setting up the map and how to make it functional, we are going to be covering all that in this tutorial. Now, I'm going to be leaving a link to this particular tutorial material in a drive. Additionally, I will also be leaving the link to the data sets for those that would want to build along or practice along. And don't forget, do wait to give me a shout out on LinkedIn. Let me see what you're able to come up with. And the best dashboard gets a prize, which I won't make known for now. So let's get started. So I already have my dashboard open here. So the first thing we have to do is we go over to File, then we go over to Get Data, then we go over to Text CSV. Then over here, we're going to look for Financials. Financials. So this is a dashboard we are going to be making use of. Then I will just go ahead and open this dashboard. Now this is a preview of our dashboard. As you can see, the delimiter here is comma. So this is a comma separated file. That means it is a CSV file. Now, this description, this sample of the data or the preview of this data we are seeing is based on 200 rows. So from here, we can actually see the columns contained in this data set. As you can see, our segments, the country, products, discount band, and the rest of them. Now, because we have data cleaning to perform on these data sets, we will not go ahead to load this directly to our Power BI. Instead, we are going to click on the transform data to perform our data cleaning. Now, once we click on the transform data, this takes us to our Power Query editor. Now, the Power Query editor is actually where you perform all data cleaning and data preprocessing in Power BI. Now, if you've been following my tutorial, I always say One thing I like about Power BI, or sorry, one thing I like about the Power Query Editor is that it is non-destructive. So whatever steps we take, we can always undo it at the right pan of of the Power Query Editor. So let me say, for example, I go ahead and click on this column, and I feel like I want to remove this column from my data set. So all I have to do is I simply right click on this column and I click remove. Now, whatever steps we actually take actually shows here on the right pan of our Power Query Editor. Now, when you look here, you see that we successfully removed the column. Now, let me say I do not actually want to remove the column, or probably I removed the column by mistake, and I want to take and I want to bring my column back. All I have to do is go over here and click this, and you see this brings us my column. Now, that is one thing I love about Power Query Editor. It is non-destructive and you can always undo whatever you have done. Now, let's go ahead. Now, one thing I want you to know is that we have various steps when it comes to cleaning your data. But the major steps are: first, number one, you have to confirm your data type. Ensure that all the columns are in their appropriate data type. Number two, we have to confirm the content of the data to ensure that each rows in our column are clean and doesn't have any non-numerical character that will actually pose as a challenge when we are performing our analysis. The third step is to ensure that we have no duplicated values, as having duplicated values in our columns can actually pose as a big challenge when we're performing our data modeling. So firstly, we have to go ahead and confirm that all our data or all our columns are in their appropriate data type. Now, you know that we have different types of data, especially if you're familiar with Power BI and if you're familiar with Python. You know we have different types of data. Now, when you look at this segment column, you find out that we have government, mid-market, and the rest of them. Now, when you look at the content of this segment column, you'll find out that they are majorly text. Now, in Power BI, we call this text, but in Python, it is called a string. Now, when you also go to country, you find out that it is actually the same text. That means it is similar to the segment column. So this is also a text column. So in Power BI, we call it text, but in Python, it is called a string. Now, to know the data type that your column is in, what you have to do is when you look right here by the left-hand side of this column, you see what is, from what you can see here, you can see that it is showing ABC. Now, to actually get more information on the data type, all you have to do is click on this ABC and it shows you the different type of data we have in Power BI. Now, when you scroll down to ABC, as you can see that the ABC stands for text data type, which simply means that the segment column is in its appropriate data type. When you look over here, you see we have the decimal number. Now, in Python, this decimal number data type is called a float. Decimal number data type are data types that have decimal numbers. For example, when you look at the unit code, we can see that we have .50, .00, .00, .00. So any data type with decimal numbers is called a decimal number data type in Power BI, but in Python it is called a float. Now, when you look at this, you can see that we also have whole number. Now, whole number are data type without any decimal numbers. For example, we have our 10, 20, 40, 50, 60. Now, these are types of whole number data type, but in Python, it is called an integer. Now, date time and dates. Now, date time is a type of data type that contains both date and time, while date is a type of data type that contains only date. Time is a type of data type that contains only time, while date time slash time zone is a type of data type that contains the date, contains the time, and contains the time zone. Binary, which is also called our true or false also. So they are mostly similar things, the similar type of data type. Now, if you actually saw my last tutorial, I actually uploaded about 3 days ago. That tutorial currently has almost 1,000 views. Now, I talked extensively on locale, but in this tutorial, we are not going to be covering locale because we have no need for that. Now, let's move ahead. Now, when you look at the segment, we can conclude that the segment is in its appropriate data type, country is in its appropriate data type, product is in its appropriate data type, and discount bound is in its appropriate data type. Now, when we look at unit sold, you see that unit sold is giving us a text. Okay, unit sold is giving us a text. When you look at here, it shows ABC. Unit sold is giving us a text, which is not supposed to be so. Now, from my explanation, I told you that any data type that has decimal numbers is called a decimal number data type, and not a text. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and examine this unit sold. Now, when you examine this unit sold, you will see that we have non-numerical characters in this unit sold. Now, what are non-numerical characters? The non-numerical characters you see here, we have something like our dollar sign. Now, this is an example of non-numerical characters. Now, let's go ahead and cancel that. Now, let's say, for example, because we know that this particular data type is inappropriate, let's say we want to go ahead and change this unit sold to its appropriate data type, which is the decimal number. Now, what we have to do is right click. So once we right click, we are going to see change type. So once you see change type, once you click on the change type, you see that the entire data types we have in Power BI comes up. Now, when we go ahead and click on decimal number, and you click on replace current, now you see that once we try changing this unit code from text data type to decimal data type, it gives us error. Now, why is it giving us error? It is giving us error because of there are non-numerical characters we should have eliminated before going ahead to actually change the data type to its appropriate data type. Now, what we have to do is we have to go ahead and undo this. So once we go ahead and undo this, you see that this comes back to what it was before. Now let's move ahead. Now, when working with Power BI, there are some things you need to pay attention to. For example, you need to pay attention to this. Okay. Now, this gives us information on our data. Okay. Now let's move to this. Let's move here. This gives us information on our data. Okay. Now, when you see this tells us if we have any error in our data, this tells us if we have any empty rows, and it tells us the validity of our data. Okay. Now, so when working with Power BI, you must ensure to pay attention to this particular information here. Now let's move ahead. Now, for us to be able to change the data type of our unit sold, we have to first of all eliminate non-numerical characters. And how do we do that? So once we click on here, we can actually see all the non-numerical characters contained in our data. Okay. Now what we have to do is let's go ahead and click cancel. Now, to change that, to remove the dollar signs we have in our column, so we can actually be able to change our column from text data type to decimal point data type. What we have to do is this. Now let me click out of this column. Now, to actually remove the non-numerical characters, what we have to do is click on the column, right click on it, then let's go over to replace values. Now, the value we are trying to replace is what we are going to be inputting here. So, because we are trying to replace the dollar sign, we are going to be inputting dollar. Now, what do we want to change the dollar with to? We are going to be leaving it blank because we do not wish to replace the dollar sign with anything. So, we are going to say OK. Now, this automatically removes our dollar sign. Now, when you see here, it says replace values because we have successfully replaced the dollar sign with nothing. Now, we can simply right click on this column, go to change data type, and we can simply say decimal number. Now, this successfully changes our data type. Okay, this successfully changes our data type. So we can simply say OK. Now, the next thing we need to look at is we need to look at our manufacturing price. Just like our unit sold column, our manufacturing price is giving us ABC, which is giving us a text instead of decimal number. Now, when you also go ahead to analyze this, you see that we also have non-numerical characters, which is the dollar sign in each row. Now, what we have to do is we just have to do the same process we did with our unit sold. Of course, all we have to do is right click on this, then we click on replace values, then we click on dollar, then we click on with nothing, then we say okay. Then we can also right click, then click on replace change type, okay, then click on decimal number. Now this changes our type. Now, instead of us going ahead to do this one after the other, which is going to take us a lot of time, we can simply right click on the next two columns and change them using the same steps I showed you. Now, you would be wondering, why didn't I just click on all and change them at once? Now, I will tell you why. When you actually look at these columns, you will find out that mostly the only thing we need to change are the dollar signs, right? But when you look at this, you see that we also have dollar minus signs, which we have to deal with. Now, there are various ways of dealing with this. You can actually use the split column to actually work on this, the split column method to work on this. But the fastest is the replace values method. That is why I am making use of the replace value method. In my previous tutorial, I made use of the split column. Here we just have to split the column using a specific delimiter or using a specific character. Then once we have splitted the column, maybe we split the dollar sign out, then we can delete that column, then move ahead with it. But this one is more beginner friendly, easier and understandable. Now, the next thing we have to do is let's work on our sales price column and our gross sales. Now, to work on that, what we have to do is we click on our sales price column, then you hold down your shift key and then you click on your gross sales column. Now, you have to go over to right click, then you click on replace values, then you click on dollar, right? Then you say replace with nothing and okay. Now let's check that. Now, when you go ahead to analyze this, you will see that we have successfully eliminated the dollar signs, right? Now, the next thing we have to do is also go ahead and analyze this. You also see that we have successfully eliminated our dollar sign. So you can click on cancel. Now, to change the data type from text data type to decimal data type, what we have to do is click. What we have to do is click on the sales price column, hold down your shift key, and click on the gross sales column. Now, once you have clicked on these two columns, what you have to do is right click, then go over to change type, then click on decimal. Now, this changes the type data type to its appropriate data type, right? Now, let's go ahead to work on our discount column. Now, this discount column actually gives us the total amount of discounts that was given per row. Okay, now it shows us the total amount of discounts that was given for each segment, each country, each product. Now, this discount band here tells us the various type of discount band we have, where we have the high, low, medium, unknown, where maybe some segments have high discounts, some segments have low discount, some segments have medium discount, while some segments do not give discount at all. When we look at this discount column, you will see that in this discount column we have dollar dash sign, okay, and we also have dollar signs, okay. Now we are going to be handling this using the same way we handled the others. Now, what we have to do for this, we have to simply right click, then we go over to replace values, then we say dollar dash. Now, before, when we insert the value that we want to replace, we go ahead and leave this blank simply because we have figures in the row. But now, when you look at these rows, you'll find out that the only thing we have in these rows is the dollar dash. Now, if we replace this dollar dash with nothing, our we are going to be having empty rows, and that is not what we want to start dealing with. So for this particular goal, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be replacing the dollar dash with zero. So what happens is all the columns with dollar dash gets filled with zero automatically. So the next column we have to handle is the sales column. Now let's go ahead and investigate the sales column. Now, when you look at this sales column, you also find out that we have dollar signs here. We have non-numerical sign, which is the dollar sign here. So we are also going to go ahead to handle it. Now, we forgot to do one thing. After we handled our distance discount column, we did not change it to the appropriate data type. As you can see, it is still showing us text data type. Now let's go ahead and confirm. As and secondly, remember that in our discount column, what we actually handled was the dollar dash sign. We did not handle the dollar columns, the dollar signs. Okay. Now what we have to do is we have to go ahead and handle that dollar sign. So to do that, we go over to replace values, then we say dollar, then we say replace with nothing, then we say okay. Now that handles the dollar sign. So let's move ahead. So the next thing we have to do is we go ahead to right click and say change data type, and we click on decimal. Now we have successfully changed our discount column. Now let's move ahead. Now when we go over to sales, we also see that we have our dollar sign. Now to change that, we also click on this and we see that we also have our dollar sign. Now let's go ahead and look at our COGS, which means cost of goods sold. Now when we click on this, we see that we also have our dollar signs here, correct? Now instead of going ahead to handle the sales and cost of goods sold separately, we can simply right click on the both of them, click on replace values, then click on dollar, then insert dollar, sorry, then we leave this blank, then we say okay. Then we can also go ahead to right click on this and say change type to decimal. Now that makes things a bit faster. Now the next thing we have to go ahead to handle is our decimal. Now, the next thing we have to go ahead to handle is our profit column. Now, let's investigate that. Now, when you look at this profit column, you will find out that it has more non-numerical characters compared to the other columns we have been working on. And the non-numerical characters we have here are we have the dollar sign, then we have the open and close brackets. Now, we have to go ahead and handle that. Now to handle that, what we have to do is we go over to replace values, okay? Then we go over to say dollar sign, then replace with nothing. We also go ahead to say replace values, then we go over to say close opening brackets, I will say replace with nothing. Then we also go over to our replace values, I will say closing brackets, I will say replace with nothing. Now let's go ahead and check what we just did. Now, when you also look at this, you will find out that we have successfully replaced the non-numerical characters in our rows, but there is something we are missing. Now, when you look at this, you find out that we have rows that just have dash in them. Okay, now let's go ahead and deselect, or now let's go ahead and select only the rows with the dash, and we say okay. Now, when you look at this, you see that we have five to six rows that do not have any figures in them. It just says dash. Okay. Now, we have to go ahead and handle this because if we don't go ahead and handle this, we'll be unable to actually change this column to the appropriate data type. Now, let's go ahead and do this. Now, to do that, we go over to replace values. Then we go over to say dash, then we replace it with zero and we say okay. Now let's go over to our data set. As you can see, we have successfully replaced the dash rows with zero. Then we can simply say okay. Now we can simply right click on this and replace and change data type to decimal. Now this successfully changes our data type. Now, when you look at this, we actually have this date column here. Now, this date column is giving us as ABCD, which is text data type, instead of date. Now, as you can see, this is not a date time data type. Okay, it's a date data type because it only contains dates and not time. But as you can see, this data type is given as text. Now let's go ahead to change the data type to date data type to see what happens. Now we go ahead and right click on this and we say change type, and let's say change to date. Now, as you can see, this successfully changes it to date. Now, we have successfully changed that to date. Now, if you saw my last tutorial, we actually had issues changing our date column to date because of my local setting at that time. Okay, but at the moment, but for this tutorial, we are not encountering such challenge because I've already set up my locale appropriately. Now, let's go over to month number. Now, as you can see, we have the month number here, we have the month name, and we have the year. Now, let's move ahead. Now, if you look at these three columns here, you will see that they are actually still parts of this particular date table, right? This date column, okay? Now, as you can see, this is giving us the month name. As you can see, this is giving us the month number. This is giving us the month name, and this is giving us the year. Now, we are going to be eliminating these three columns because we are still going to be setting up a proper date column ourselves using our date table. Now, we just have to click on the month number, hold down your shift key and click on the other columns. Okay. Then you go over to right click and say remove columns. Now we have successfully removed that columns. Now from what we can see, we have successfully cleaned our data set. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead to start creating our dimension tables, or shorts for shorts, our dim tables. Now, there is something you need to understand about creating our dimensional tables. Now, you'll know that we have two ways of creating these dim tables. Before now, I have actually uploaded a tutorial on data modeling. And during this tutorial, I created the dim tables using DAX. But in this situation, we are not going to be creating our dim tables using, we are going to be creating our dim tables from our Power Query editor here. Now, to do that, one thing you need to understand is there is something we call referencing and duplicate. Now, when you are referencing a table, you are linking the table to the new table that you are creating. But when you are duplicating the table, you're simply creating a duplicate of this table. Now, let's go ahead and take a practical example. Now, we are going ahead to start creating our dimensional tables, or dim tables for short. Now, when you look at this, you will find out that we have several dim tables that we need to create. Now, remember that our dim tables are mostly our non-numerical tables, while our fact table contains our entire data set. But when you look at this, you find out that we are going to be creating several dim tables. Now we have segments, country, products, and discount band. Now these are the dim tables we are going to be creating. Additionally, we are going to be creating a proper date table using DAX because we are going to be performing several complex time intelligence analysis. But for now, the first thing I want us to do is go ahead and create our dim tables. Now, to do that, the first thing we have to do is click on our main data set, which is the financials. Then we right click. Now we click on reference. Now, remember I said that there is a huge difference between referencing a table and duplicating a table. Now, before I go ahead to explain that more, let's go ahead to rename this and let's call this dim segments. Now, when you are referencing a table, this main financials data set is still the source. Now, let me explain what I mean by referencing and duplicate. Now, when you are referencing a table, just the way I have referenced this dim segment, okay, just the way I created this dim segment by referencing these financials. One thing you need to know is that this dim segment is tied to this financials table, okay, because it is referencing it. So this dim segment is tied to this financials table, okay, it is the source. So whatever changes we actually make will actually on Whatever changes we make in this financials table will actually reflect on our dim segment. But when you are duplicating, it just simply means that you're creating a copy of the financials. You're creating a copy of these financials. So whatever you actually do in the copy of these financials will not actually affect the dim set, will not actually affect the main table. Now let's go ahead and see how this works. Now remember that we have created our dim segment, right? Now, because of this dim segment is actually for this our segment column, we are going to be clicking on this segment and we are going to be right clicking and we are going to be removing other columns. Now let me show you what references actually mean and what it actually does. Now when you go over to these financials, you see that we have our segments here, right? Now I told you that when you're referencing a table, this the reference table, the table you reference remains the source of your new table. Now, whatever you actually do in these financials will automatically reflect in your dim segment. Now, let's take an example. Now, let's go ahead to our segment column and let's say replace values. Now, let's say we want to replace government with gov. So when you replace government with gov and we say okay, now let's go over to our date segment. You see that it has automatically changed to gov from government. Now this is what reference means. When you're referencing a table, the reference table, which is this table, which is a reference table, remains the source. And whatever you do in this table reflect on this particular table. But now let's go ahead and duplicate this. To duplicate this, we simply right click and say duplicate. And let's call this financials copy. Financials copy. Now, when you duplicate a table, you're just having a replica of this particular financials. It's just like a copy or a replica of this particular financials. Now, this table is an independent table. It is not tied to these financials. So whatever you actually do in these financials will not affect whatever you have in the financials copy. Now, let's say, for example, we want to change gov back to government. Now, let's go to replace values. Okay. Then we go over to say gov and we say replace with government. And let's say okay. Now, as you can see, we have successfully replaced gov with government, right? Now, when we go over to our dim segment, you find out that gov automatically changes back to government. Now, let's go over to our financials. You see that nothing actually happens here. So, because this table is an independent copy of the financials, okay? Now, we do not need this table, so we are going ahead to simply delete this. And we say yes. Now let's go back to our dim segments. Now, when you actually look at these dim segments, you will find out that we have just five types of segments there. But when you look at the columns, you see that we have columns that are duplicated. Now, but when you look at the rows, you see that we have rows that are duplicated. Now, what we have to do is we have to handle our duplicated values. Now, to do that, what we have to do is we right click, then we go over to remove duplicate. Now, once we remove duplicate, you can see these are the five unique values we actually have in our segment. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to create our dim country. Now, to do that, we also go ahead to right click and we say reference and we call this dim country, right? So what we have to do is we have to hold our country, select our country, then we right click and we say remove other columns. Because what we want here is just the country. Then we can also right click and say remove duplicates. Now we can see the distinct countries we have in our column. Now we have to go back to our financials. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to create our products dim table or dimensional table. Now to do that, we go over to right click and we say duplicate. Okay. Now we go over to double click on this, and let's say we call this dim products. Now, sorry, dim products. Now, just like we have been doing, we simply right click on products, then we right click and say remove other column. Now, Now, in a situation where we have product ID and the rest of them, it falls under here. But in this situation, we do not have product ID or anything. Now, we simply go ahead to also right click and say remove duplicates. Now, we simply only have the 6 distinct product types in this our dimensional table. Now, the next thing we have to do is go over to our main data set, and we look at the next column we have to create a dimensional table for, which is our discount band. Now, to do that, we also go over to right click and say reference. Now, we double click on this and change name to theme discount band. Okay. Now we click on our discount band, then we say remove other columns, right? Now we right click and also say remove duplicate. Now we have successfully created our dim tables. Now the only thing we are lacking is our date table, which we are also going to be creating once we get to our Power BI desktop. Now, for now, I feel like we have successfully created our dim tables, and we have successfully cleaned our data sets. So we can go ahead to close and apply. Now we wait for Power BI to apply the changes. Now Power BI has successfully applied our changes. Now before we move ahead, what I want us to do is let's go over to save this as, let's call it Power BI tutorial. Then we can say okay. So I have to choose a location. So I can say downloads and I say okay. Now we have successfully saved that. Now the first thing I want us to do is go ahead and create our date table. Now our date table actually ensures that we have a well calculated, accurate and organized dates. This will actually help us to perform time intelligence analysis. And it's actually very important to have your date table when you want to perform time intelligence analysis and when you want to perform data modeling. Now, what we have to do is let's go over to our tutorial material. Now, when you look at our tutorial material, I said we have complex DAX functions that we'll be working with. Now, the first thing I want us to do is go over to this date table. Now, one thing you need to understand is that this date table will be coined or will be created from our date table in our financials. So this date table will be created from our date table in our financials. Okay. Now, let's move ahead. Now, what we have to do is we have to go over to this particular DAX function. So we click on this and copy this. Then we go over to our dashboard and we click on modeling. So once we click on modeling, we click on new table. So this opens up where we are going to insert our DAX. So once we click on new table, we can simply go ahead and highlight this and copy what we have there, okay? And copy our DAX functions. Now, as you can see that we have successfully created an accurate date table using this DAX function. So what we did was we just added columns. Then in our calendar, we say the minimum dates in our financials and the maximum dates in our financials. So we have now, when we create this table, we are going to be having our year, we are going to be having our month number, we are going to be having our month name, we are going to be having our quarter, our day of the week, and our day name. Now, this table is what we are going to be using for our time intelligence analysis. Now, what we are going to do is we go over to here and say, okay. Then we can remove this. So as you can see, we have successfully created our date table, okay, under our dim dates. Now, when you click down of this, you will see that we have our dates, okay, which combines. Now you see that we have our dates, which combines our date name, day of week, month name, month number, quarter, and year. Now, this date table is what we are going to be using for our time intelligence analysis. Now, that's not all. Now, after creating your date table, Power BI may not recognize it as a date table. Now, it is your responsibility as an analyst to let Power BI know that this is your date table. Because if you do not mark this date table as a date table, you will actually have challenges when creating your relationship in your data modeling and when performing your time intelligence analysis. Now, how do we mark our dim dates as our date table? Now, to do that, what we have to do is we go over to click on our dim date, okay? Then we go over to mark as date table, okay? So once we click on mark as date table, then we go over to click here, then we say date. Then Power BI will say validated successfully. This means that Power BI has noted, has saved, has known, and has recognized this dim date as our date table. Then we can go ahead and say, okay. Then we can go ahead and take this out. Now we have successfully created our date table. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do before we go ahead to start calculating our measures is this. I want us to go over to our modeling and start creating our relationships. Now, if you look at this, Power BI has successfully created the relationship based on what it understood from the data. Now, what is this telling us? This is telling us that we did a very good job with our data cleaning and our creating our date table. But for the course of this tutorial, we are going to be removing all the relationships created by Power BI and we are going to be recreating these relationships ourselves. Now, to remove the relationships, what we have to do is I will click here, then I'll right click and say delete. Then I say yes. I will also right click here and I will say delete. Then I will say yes. Then I will also click here and I will say delete and I will say yes. Then I will also click here. I will say delete and I say yes. Now, all relationships that were automatically created by Power BI has been deleted. Now, I want us to go back to start recreating these relationships from the scratch. Now, what I will have to do first is I would like to rearrange my data set to give it that star schema like. Remember, we are working with the star schema. Now, what I will have to do is I will move this our facts table to the middle, okay? And I will move the dimensional tables to the side of the facts table. So I can move this over here. Now, let's not forget our dim date. So I can bring the dim date over here. Now, this is giving us this star-shaped field. Okay. Now, the next thing I want us to do is I want us to confirm that we have all our dim tables entered. Now, I want us to go over to our Power BI desktop and I want us to check how many dim tables we have. Now, let's count this. We have one, two, three, four, five. We have five dim tables. Now let's go over to our modeling. Now let's say one, two, three, four, five. This simply means our dim tables are correct. Now we can go ahead to start creating the relationship. Now the first relationship I want us to create is the relationship between our facts table and our dim date. Now to do that, we go over to date. Remember that this debate was actually coined or created out of this date table, okay? Out of this Remember that this dim date was actually created out of this dates column in our facts table. So what we have to do is we will go over to click on dates and drag it over to our dim date. Now this has created a relationship with our facts table and our dimensional dates table. Now, the next thing we also have to do is we have to go over to our products, then we can drag our products to our dim products. Now, this has also created a relationship between our products dimensional table and our facts table. Now, the next thing we also have to do is let's create a relationship between our discount band table and our fact table. Now, to do that, we simply drag our discount band table to our discount band column in our financials. Now, this has successfully created a relationship. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to do is work on our dim country. Now, we simply go over to for our country column in our facts table. Then we click on it and drag it to our dim country. Now, this has successfully created a relationship. Now, the next thing we have to do is go over to our segments, dim segments table, and drag it to our segment column in our facts table. Now, this has successfully created this relationship. Now, we have successfully performed our data modeling. Now, I want us to click on this table and I want us to ensure that Power BI recognizes this as a country table because when we are going to be working with our map, this will pose as a problem if Power BI has not recognized this as a country. Now, what we have to do is click down. Let's go over to advanced and let's scroll down. So we go over to so we scroll up. So once we click on advanced, okay, it's giving me something that I'm not looking for. So this is not what I'm looking for. So we actually have to click on the country, not the table itself. Now, when we look down, okay, we click over to advanced. Now, when you click over to advanced, you see that sorts by country, so it's showing that data category unrecognized. So what we have to do is click over here and say, once we click here, we say country slash region. So as you can see, this comes up, which means that Power BI now recognizes this dim country table as a country. Now, these are the major things we have to do here. Now, as you can see, it's also reflecting here as a country. Now, we have successfully completed our data modeling. Now, the next thing we have to do is go over to our Power BI desktop and start calculating our KPIs. Now, let's go over to our dashboard to see the KPIs we are calculating. Now, as you can see, we are going to be calculating total sales KPI, total profit KPI, and total discount amount KPI. We are also going to be calculating our sales growth percentage KPI. Now, I think those are the major KPIs we are going to be calculating. Now, let's go over to start calculating them. Now, we can click on this and we can click on this. Okay. Now, normally I actually like hosting my KPIs in a blank table, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be hosting them under my financials. Now, to calculate the first KPI, we click on the financials, then we go over to modeling, then we go over to new measure. Now, the first KPI we want to calculate is our total sales. Now, to calculate our total sales, we say total sales is equals to the sum of sales in our financials. So we look for sales in our financials, we close this and we say, okay. Now we have successfully calculated our total sales. Then we can remove this. Now, the next thing we are going to do is create a new measure to calculate our total profits. So we say total profits is equals to sum of profits in our financials. So we look for profits in our financials, sorry. So we are looking for profits. We look for profit in our financials, then we close this and we say okay, right? Now the next KPI we are going to be calculating is our total discount. Now to do that, we say new measure and we say total discount. Okay. Now this should be equals to sum of discount. Okay, so we look for our discounts and we close this and we say okay, right? Now we have successfully calculated our three major KPIs. Now let's go back. Now the next KPI we are going to be calculating is our sales growth percentage. Now to do that, we are going to be making use of this DAX. Now this is what we are going to be making use of to calculate our sales growth percentage. So what we are going to be doing is we simply have to copy this, then we go over to Power BI and we say modeling, then we'll say new measure, then we paste this. Okay. Now for this, we are not going to be making use of our financials date. We are going to be making use of our date table. Okay. Now what we have to do here is we simply go over here and say dim underscore dates. Okay. So we are going to be making use of the date table in our dim date. Okay. So this was what we made use of. So this was what we made use of. We made use of this date table and not the one in our financials. Okay. Now let's go ahead and hold our shift key and let's go down so we can analyze this column, this DAX together. Now, for here, as you can see in this date table, okay, we did not make use of the financials dates, okay. Instead, we make use of our dim date table. Remember, I told you that after we have performed our dates, after we have actually created our dates table, marked it as a date, and created a relationship in our modeling, for every dates analysis or every time intelligence analysis we are going to be performing, we are going to be making use of this dates table. So what we have to do here, we can simply go ahead and delete this. Then we simply say, okay. Now this creates our sales growth percentage measure. We can go ahead to remove this. Okay. Now let's go over to our dashboard again. Now we have successfully created all our measures. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead to start building our dashboard. So far for this tutorial, we have covered our data cleaning, data modeling, and now we are on our dashboard building phase. Now, the first thing we have to do is go over to our dashboard. So the first thing we have to do is we have to achieve the structure of the dashboard. Okay. Now, to do that, we first have to go over to our desktop. Then we click on Insert. Then we click on Shape and we click on rectangle. Then we can go ahead to start formatting this rectangle. So what we have to do is move this over here. Then we make this a bit smaller. Then we can go over to style. Then we can change this to white. Okay. Now for the border, we are going to leave it on, but we are going to be changing it to a lighter color. Now let's say we are going to be changing it to this color. Okay. Now, so we know that the border is there, but it seems like it is not there. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead to click on this and we copy and we paste it. Then we can go over to resize this to actually suit what we have over here. Okay, then we can draw this down here. Okay. Now, the next thing we have to do is let's go back to our dashboard to see what we are doing. Okay. Now, I think we have to go over to this and we have to make this a bit smaller. Okay. Then I think we should make this a bit smaller also. Then we can actually push this in a bit. Okay. So for this, we can actually push it here a bit. Now, the next thing we have to achieve is let's achieve the sales text right here. Now to do that, we go over to our dashboard and we click on our text tool. Then we can actually make this small because it's looking quite big. Okay, so we can make this a bit smaller so it won't look so wide. And move this. We can also make this. So the first thing we have to achieve will say sales. Then we can go over to use Canva. Okay. So that was what I used for that particular dashboard. I made use of Canva. Then we can go over to make this 14. Then we can bold it. Then as you can see, we have a white background below our text. So what we have to do is click on our text. Then we go over to effects and let's turn on background. Then after turning off the background, we can simply make this smaller and let's highlight our text and send it to middle. Then we can make this more smaller, more smaller. Then we can move this over here. Now that achieves the cells we saw up there. Now let's go ahead and verify that. Okay, so I think need to make the cells bigger. So let's make it 16 or let's make it 18. Okay, now I think that's much better. Now the next thing we have to do is let's click on the cells and click on the rectangle here. Let's go over to format, let's go over to align and let's say middle. Okay, no, that's not what I'm trying to achieve. So I'll just say Control Z. So I can simply go back to format and let's go back to align and let's say center. So this ensures that the cell stays at the center of the rectangle. Now this is actually moving, so we can just make this longer. Okay. Now the next thing we have to achieve is we have to achieve the dashboard right here. Now to do that, we go over to our dashboard, then let's pick our text tool and let's make this a bit smaller also. So because it's looking too long. So we make this a bit smaller. Let's move this together and let's say dashboard. So we can highlight this and change this to Canva. Then we can make this 16. Okay. Then so this reads sales dashboard, right? Then we can also did we bold it over there? So no, I think we just have to make this 18. Okay. So we can make this smaller, then go over here to turn off background. We go over to effects and we turn off background. Then we can move this over to here. Okay. So this reads sales dashboard. So we can make this smaller too. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is go over to our dashboard and we have to achieve this particular place. Okay. Now to do that, the first thing we have to do is we have to achieve the precious Benjamin marketing analyst, the photo and this. So let's go over to our dashboard and let's go over to inserts and let's say image. So this is the photo. We are just going to click on it and we say okay. Then what we have to do is we have to make this smaller. Okay. So we have to make this smaller. Then we can move it over here. Right? So we can move it over here. So we can go over to pick up our text tool. Then we insert my name, which says Precious Benjamin. So we say Precious Benjamin. So we can go over to highlight this and let's change it to Canva. Now I want to make this 11 instead of 10. So I'll make this 11. Okay. Then I can make this smaller. Then I can move this here a bit. Then I can make it smaller. Then I can go over to turn off background and make this smaller. Then I can move this here. So we can go over to make this a bit smaller too. Okay, just small enough to make sure it doesn't have that limited. Now, the next thing we can do is also, instead of going over to pick our text tool again, I can simply click on this, copy and paste it. Then I can move this over here. Okay. Then I can simply say marketing analyst. Then I can simply make this smaller. Let me make this, okay, I would like to make this 12. Okay, let me make this 12, and then I can leave this at 10, at 11. Then I can make this smaller. Then I can move this right under this. Okay, now that says Benjamin Precious Marketing Analyst. Now the next thing I would want to do is I would like to click on this, then click on that, then right click and say group. Okay, now I will also want to click on this, then go over to format and say, let's say middle. Okay, so this aligns. Now the next thing we are going to be achieving is this right here. Okay, we have to achieve this, we have to achieve this, and we have to achieve this. Now, but first I want us to achieve this. Now, to do that, we have to go over to Canva, which is among one of the tools I said we'll be using for this tutorial. Now, we go over to Canva and let's wait for that to load up. So once this has loaded up, what we have to do is we go over to here and we say down icon, and we say okay. So we should go to elements, please, not the sign. So we say down icon. So once this opens up, we have to go over to graphics. Then this was the icon that was used. Okay, so but I would like to use this, so I'll click on this, and well, this is looking too bold, but let's see what it looks like. Oh no, I think it's looking too bold. I'll rather use this. So I will make this bold. Okay, I'll make this bold. Then I will make this, okay, this is black, so I will leave it that way. Then I will go over to share. Then I'll go over to download. Then I will say SVG. Okay, I'll say SVG and I'll say download on a transparent background. Then I'll say download. Now this downloads this icon as an SVG. Now it's saying there's only one image, okay, so I can simply go ahead and duplicate. So in Canva, you cannot download just one image, okay, because I'm using the premium version. For you to use a premium icon or premium graphics, you need to have more than two files or two images on your design. Now I can simply go ahead to share again. Then I can simply go ahead to download this. But now I will have to cancel. Okay, it has already downloaded, but I will have to cancel. As you can see, it downloaded as a zip file because I downloaded the two pages instead of one. Now to do this, we have to go over to share and I click on download. Then I go over to current page and I say done and I say download. Now this downloads just a single file. Okay. Now we can simply go over to our dashboard. Then we go over to insert. Then we go over to buttons. Then we can click on any button of our choice here. So once that adds it up, then I can go ahead to move this over here. I can make it bigger. Okay. Now, after making that bigger, the next thing is I have to go over to my style. Okay. Then I scroll right down. Okay. Then I can turn this to, I can go over to my style and scroll right down. Sorry. Then I say icon. Okay. So once you see this icon, you go over to click on this icon type and say custom. So once you click on custom, it gives you it gives you an option to download an image or an icon you wish to use. So you go over to browse, click on this, then you go over to click on the icon we downloaded, which is an SVG file. Then we go over to open this up. Now this brings our icon right here. Then we can simply go over to resize it. Okay. Then we have to turn off background. Okay, background is already turned off. So we can simply move this right here. So we can make that smaller. So this is looking much better to me. Now the next thing we have to achieve is we have to achieve this right here. Okay. Now to do that, we have to go over to our 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 Canva, then we have to delete this. Okay, so we can delete this. Then we go over to notification icon. So we say notification icon. So we click on this. Now we go over to graphic. Then we go over to pick this notification icon. Then we can make it bigger, right? We can make it bigger. Then we ensure to centralize it. Then we can simply go over to download. Then we also download with the same settings, SVG, transparent background, and page one. Then we download this. Now, after downloading this, we head over to our desktop. So we head over to our desktop and again we go over to buttons. Then we can make use of reset this time around. So it doesn't matter which you use. So you bring it over here, you can make it bigger. Then you go over to your style. Then you move down to icon. Then you go over to custom and you browse and you pick this icon we just downloaded and open up. Now this opens up our icon right here. Okay. Now we are just going to leave this right here. Okay. Or let's make this a bit smaller. So okay. So we are just going to leave this here. Then we are still going to go over to our Canva. Then we can simply delete this. Then we can pick a circle. So we can pick a circle. Okay. Then we can go over to make this bigger. Okay, we can make this bigger. Okay, then we turn this to red. So we can make this red, right? This goes to turn to red. So we are going to turn this to red, please. So this will be red. Okay. Then we have to make sure it is position center. Then we go over to download. So the same settings and all. Now we go over to our out to our Power BI again. Then we can simply copy and duplicate this. Then we go over to our style. Then we go over to icons. Then we say we remove this. Then we click to bring in our cycle. Now this brings in our cycle right here, right? Now we can simply go over to make this smaller, okay? So we can make this smaller, then we can make this smaller, make it smaller, okay? Then we can move this over here, right? So this is still looking a bit big, so we can move it over here, right? So we can move it over here, then we can move down to give that feel. Then we can go over to text. Then we go over to say to. Okay. Then we can use we can say let's make use of a bold font. So we can say Georgia, right? Then we can make this bigger. Okay, so we can make this 16. Then we can say both this, right? Then we can simply make this smaller, okay? So then we take this to the middle, then we make this smaller, okay? Then we can drag this over here, right? Then we can simply click and make this white, okay? Then we can move this right here. Okay, as you can see, this is having a background, so we have to go over to effects and turn off background. So we can now move this over here. We can move this over here. Now that shows the two we have there. But I think this font is looking a bit off. So I would like to change the font. Now let's change it to something. So let's change it to Tahoma. Okay. Now this looks much better for me. Then we can simply click on everything. Then we can say group. Then we can move this over here. So I want to move this down a bit. Okay. Now we can go over to the next thing we have to achieve. Now this is English with the drop down, right? So to do that, we go over to pick up our text tool and we go over to say, so we go over to say English, then we say US. So we can simply highlight and make this Canva. So I want to make this 11. Then I can make this smaller. Okay. Then I can go back to effects and let's turn off background. Then we can take this up here, right? Can take this up here. Okay. Then we can move over to this, right? Then we can highlight this, all this, and let's say format middle. Okay. Then for this, we can simply copy and paste this. Then let's move this over to here, right? Then we can simply click on all these three and let's centralize this, put them in the middle. Now this is it. Okay. Now this is it. We have successfully achieved up here, right? So we are left with here. Now to do that, the next thing we have to do is we go over to our, now for this we can simply go over to shape and let's make this a bit rounded. All right, now it's looking too round. So just a bit, maybe let's make it 5. 5 is looking much better. Okay. But honestly, I do not really like this here. So for this particular dashboard, I will just eliminate this. So I'm just going to leave this as this. Okay. So I can simply say middle. So that's it. So I can simply pick this to say middle. Okay. Then this and this I can say middle. Now let's move ahead. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to achieve this right here. Okay, we have to achieve this right here. Now to do that, we go over to our dashboard and let's go over to pick our shape. Okay, we'll pick our shape, then we'll make this smaller. We just make this smaller. Okay, so we can make this a bit broad. Then let's go over to this. Okay, so can simply take this to be a bit longer. Okay, so for this we can make it no. Okay, okay, let me compare the size to, okay, yeah, so for this we can make this smaller. Okay, now let's see how to achieve that. So I want us to push this in a bit. Okay, probably make it smaller. I think we can make this bigger. It's looking quite big over there. This, okay, I think this big, right? So we can also make this smaller. No. So Control Z that, then we can make this smaller. Okay. Now we can actually push this out a bit. So let's push this out a bit. Then we can move this up a bit. Then let's make this a bit longer. Okay. Then we can simply go over to style and let's turn off border. Then let's make background to be light blue. Right. Now the next thing we have to do is let's go over to pick up our text tool and let's make this a bit smaller. Okay. So we make this a bit smaller. Then let's call this dashboard. Now we can highlight this and make it Canva. Okay. Then we can make it 12. Then we can make this small. Make this smaller. Then let's turn off the background and let's please make this bold. Then make it smaller. Then let's move it over here. Right. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead and achieve the icons and everything. Now what we have to do is we go over to Canva and we go over to say, let's delete this. Then we go over to say analytics icon. Then we say okay. Then we can go over to graphics and check for an icon that suits what we want to do. So analytics icon. So we can go over to use this. All right. So we can simply make this bigger. Okay. Then we can go over to make sure it is centralized. And we can go over to say download with all initial settings intact. Then let's go over to our Power BI now. And let's go over to this. Okay. So let's copy and paste this and let's move this down. Sorry, I want to move this down. Yes, let's move this down. Now, the next thing we have to do is go over to style, then go over to our icons. Then we remove this and insert the icon we just downloaded and we say okay. Now that is for our analytics, right? Now we can also go over to copy and paste this. Then we can move this. Sorry, we can say Ctrl Z. Then we can move this to here. Okay, we can move this to here, right here. Now the next thing we have to do is, of course, we go over to download the other icons we need to use. So let's just duplicate this severally. So we go over to the next icon we are going to be working with, and let's say that we have to download others, customers, charts. So we remove this. So I say others. Okay, others icon. So for this I can make use of this. Okay, so I just have to make it look bigger. Then I can just download as SVG on transparent background. Then I can also go over to look for customer icon. Then I can just pick this, then make it bigger and go over to download and download. Okay. Then I can go over to look for charts icon. So I can go over to, okay, chart icon. So I can use this. Okay, let's move down a bit. So I can just remove this and let me use this, please. Then I can go over to right click. I can go over to just download on a transparent background as SVG. Now let's go back to our Power BI. Then I can click on this and go over to style and go over to icons. Okay. Then remove this and click on this and let me download this. Now this gives us our order icon. Okay, now the next thing we have to do is we can go over to style. Okay, then we go over to icons, then we remove this, then we click on browse and let's go over to download this. Now we can move that, sorry, we can control Z and then move that here. Now the next thing we have to do is we go over to style, then we go over to icon, then we remove this, then we click on this, then we can simply make this, download this and say okay. Then we can simply move this here. Now, the next thing we have to do is let's go over to see which icons we have to download. Then we have to go over to download products and logouts. So we go over to say products, okay, products icon. So let's scroll down to see if we can see something nice to use. Products, products. So I can simply go over to this and make it bigger. Then go over to share and let's download this with the same setting. Then I can go ahead and delete this. So I can go over to log out. So I can say okay, log out icon. Now I can simply make use of this. So I can simply make this bigger, okay? Then simply go ahead to download and let's download this. Now let's go over to our Power BI. Now let's click on one of these and let's move this here. Now let's Control S to make sure we are saving our work. Now the next thing we have to do is go over to style, then let's go over to style, let's go over to icons and let's remove this and let's insert our product icon. Then we can go over to move this right here. Now the next thing we have to do is let's move this here, let's remove this, let's say browse and let's insert our logout icon and let's say okay. Now we can move this down here, right? Now the next thing we have to do is let's go over to click on all this. Okay, now let's go over to formats, let's go over to align and let's say align to center. Okay, so we can also distribute vertically. Then we can move this. So we can also click on all this again. Okay, and let's move this closer. Now the next thing we have to do is go over to, let's click on this, okay? Let's click on this. Now let's copy and paste this, okay? So we have copied and let's move that here, right? Now we can go over to say analytics, okay? Then we can go over to highlight this and let's leave it at 12. Right, now we can go over to click on this and copy and paste it. Now we can go over to move this here. Okay, so it says analytics, so we can simply make this smaller. Okay, now we can go over to move this here and let's say this is orders, right? So we make this smaller. Then we can go over to move this here. Now we can also go over to copy and we can go over to paste. Then we say customer. Now let's make this smaller and now let's move this here. Now we can go over to Ctrl V again and let's call this charts and let's make this smaller and let's move this here. Then we can go over to paste again and this is what, okay, so that I think that's products. So let's go over to say products and let's make this smaller and let's move this here. So we can go over to Ctrl V again and let's say log out. Okay, so we make this smaller. Then we bring this icon, we make it a bit smaller. Then we move it here. Okay, now we can also move the text right here. Now the next thing we have to do is let's click on all this. Okay, now let's move them back a little bit. Now let's click on this. Okay, let's click on this, let's click on this, let's click on this, let's click on this, and let's also move them back a little bit. So also let's move them back a little bit. So let's move them back a little, a little, a little, a little. Okay. Now I think this is looking too close. This is looking too close. So let's make this smaller. Okay. Now we can simply click on this, click on this, click on this. No. We can simply click on this, 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 and let's make this. Now let's take this a bit further. Okay, just 2 steps. Now the next thing we have to do is let's click on this. Let's go over to format and let's say middle. Now let's click on this. Let's go over to format and let's say middle. Now let's click on this. So make this smaller. Also make this smaller. So we click on this again, go over to format and let's say middle. Okay, then we click on this again. So let's make this a bit smaller to reduce spaces, right? Now let's click on this again, then go over to format and let's say middle. Then we do the same for customer, we make it smaller. Okay, then are these icons looking too big? So let's see if we can reduce these icons a bit. Okay, so I felt that they were looking too big, so this is now looking too pixelated. Now this is looking much better. Okay, so we can move ahead. So the next thing we actually have to achieve is we have to achieve our KPI cards. Okay, we have to achieve our KPI cards. Okay, but before we go ahead to achieve our KPI cards, I think we should achieve this right here. Okay, we should achieve this right here. Now, to do that, what we have to do is we go over to our dashboard. Okay. So once we go over to our dashboard, so we have to, let's go over to remove this, right? Now we go over to click on this and let's copy and paste that. Then we move it over here. Now let's make that smaller. Okay. Then we can make it big, make it longer rather. Okay. Now we can also take that down a bit. So we can then push it down, right? Then we can simply push it up down here. Then the next thing we have to do is let's go over to look at what that looks like. Okay, so I think it's a bit wider, so we can make that a bit wider. Then the next thing we have to do, let's go over to style and let's turn off border and let's turn on background. Let's turn on let's turn on shadow and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so it's looking like we do not actually have a shadow over there. So but let's see how we can format our shadow so it will not be that visible. So let's go over to our shadow. Now it's giving us 70%. Let's make it 86 to see what it looks like. Now let's make it 90. Okay, so it's giving us that it is there but it is not there, right? So but I still feel like it's making this look funny. Now let's go over to see this again. Okay, Now, what I would like to do here is I would like to add a rectangle. Okay. I'd like to add a rectangle over here. Then I would like to go over to style and let me turn off shadow. Okay. So I want to add a shape to this. Why does it keep? Okay. I want to add a shape to this. So should I go over to add this line, the border? So let me just add the border. Then adding the border with the shape makes it look weird. So I'll just go over to make this line. Okay. And I'll click on this. I think I don't really like the shape at all. So I'll go ahead to leave this as this. Okay. Now let's go over to style and let's go over to the border. Now let's make the width 2. Okay. Now this is looking much better for me. So now I think this is looking perfect. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go over and achieve all this we have here, okay? Now, we have to go over and achieve this. Now, this actually shows the total sales and the percentage of the total sales for each segment, okay? Like I explained earlier. This shows the total sales and the percentage of the total sales for each segment. Now, there are two ways of doing this. Now, the first way of doing this is actually by calculating the total sales for each segment. For each segment, that is, you calculate the total sales for small business, calculate the total sales for enterprise, calculate the total sales for financial for enterprise, calculate the total sales for channel partners, but this is a long process. The second step is simply by just using your filter to achieve this. Now, the next thing we have to do is we go over to click on our donut chart. Then we have to make this smaller. Okay, so it will be a bit visible. Then the next thing we have to do is we go over to our total sales and drag it to our values. Then we go over to our dim segments and we drag our segments over to our legend. Right now, as you can see, this is what we are having here. Now, instead of us to go over to start calculating the total sales for each segment, we can just see the total sales and percentage for each segment here. Now, the next thing I want us to do is go over to our slice data details label. Then I want us to go over to show data value, and percentage. Okay, so I wanted it to show the category and data value, but I also need the percentage. So I'm going to leave it to show data value and percentage total. Okay, now the next thing I want us to do is let's go over to fonts. Okay, display units. Let's say none. Okay, let's say none. And let's say percentage decimal, let's say 2. Okay, now we can go ahead and close this. Okay, now the next thing we have to do is let's go ahead and enlarge this. Now I want you to look at this particular donuts we have here. I want you to look at this particular donuts we have here. And I also want you to look at the information we have here. Now, if you look at these donuts we have here and the particular donuts we have here, you will see that there is something weird about it. Okay, there is something weird, there's something different about it. Now, I did this on purpose. Being a data analyst is not all about building dashboard. It's also about understanding your data, knowing how to manipulate your data, and knowing how to solve issues. Now, a subscriber of mine that was rebuilding one of my dashboard actually passed through this challenge, and he had to send me a message on LinkedIn telling me that the challenge he's passing through, and I had to hop in on a call with him. And when I hop in on a call with him, I realized that this was the challenge he was passing through. So I said I'm going to make the same mistake in my next tutorial so I can also educate people and teach people
you about this challenge. Okay, now when you look at this particular donut here, let's say for example we want to look at government. You see over here that government is, sorry, I want to go over to details, data details. I want to go over to values, please, and I want to say, and I want this to say auto. Okay, yes, so I'll rather leave it at auto. Now, when you look at this government segment, for example, when you look at this government segment, for example, you see that it's giving us 52.50 million, right? And the percentage is giving us 44.22%. Okay, now let's go over to the previous dashboard. Now, when we look at government, we see here that this is giving us 16.81 million, and why this is giving us 28.07%. Now, what are you noticing? There is a difference between that two data, okay, and it shouldn't be that way. Now, let's take another example. Now, when we also look at, let's look at the segment for small business. Now, when you look at small business, we see that we have a total of 42.43 million and the percentage of 35.74. Okay, now let's go over to this. Now, for small business, you see that we are having 26.71 million and 44.61%. Okay, is that correct? Now, what are you noticing here? There is a large discrepancy between this analysis and our previous analysis. Now, I'm going to show you why.
Now, let's troubleshoot this together. Firstly, I want to make this smaller. Okay, now I'll move this here a bit. Now, I'm going to pick up my card visual and I'm going to make this smaller. I'm going to move this here a bit. Now, what do I want to do? I will go over to my total sales and I will drag it to my fields. Now, as you can see, this is giving me 118.73 million. Now, when I go over to the previous dashboard, okay, my total sales is giving me what? Is giving me 59.89 million, which means that I'm getting a double of this total sales here. Now, let me show you something else. Now, I want us to calculate the total count rows for our financials. Now, to do that, we go over to insert, then we go over to modeling, then we go over to new measure. Okay, now let's say we want to count the entire rows in our financials. Okay, so what we do is we say count, sorry, so we say count rows. Okay, so let's just say count rows is equals to count rows, then financials, then we close this, then we can say okay. Now let's take our card visual again. Now I want us to go ahead and bring in these count rows here. Okay, let's bring in the count rows here. As you can see, we are having 700. Okay, now let's go over to the previous dashboard. Now let's do the same thing for this previous dashboard. So let's say new measure and let's do count rows. Okay, is equals to count, is equals to count rows, and let's say financial, and let's close that and let's say okay. Right, now let's pick up a card, let's pick up a card and let's drag count rows to this card. This gives us 372. Now what are you noticing? We are having double the rows of our financials data set. Now this is where the discrepancy in our donut chart came about. Now what actually caused this duplicate? Remember that when we were doing our data cleaning, we actually removed duplicates in our DIN tables, but we did not remove duplicates in our financials. Now, this is exactly why we are having this discrepancy in our analysis. And this was the exact challenge one of my subscribers faced that actually took him over 5 hours to resolve until he reached out to me. Now you see how duplicates can actually mess up your analysis. So now, because we handle duplicates for our dimensional tables, but not for our fact tables, you can see that we had double of the columns because this includes duplicates, and we also have double of our total sales because it also included duplicates. Now, how do we resolve this? Let's go ahead to remove this. Okay, now we go ahead to remove this, or let's just leave this here for now. Then let's go over to our financials and let's click over here and let's go over to edit query. Now this takes us to our Power Query editor. So what we have to do is we have to remove duplicate. So we can simply click on all our non-numerical columns and say remove duplicate. Okay, now we can simply close and apply. So we wait for Power BI to apply changes. Okay, so once changes have been applied, what I want us to do is I want us to go ahead and look at what we did. Now let's go ahead and pick our card visual. Okay, so once we pick our card visual, I would like us to go ahead and visualize our count rows. As you can see, this gives us 372. Now, when we go ahead again to visualize our total sales, this also gives us 559.89, which is exactly the same of what we have here. Now, as you can see, this is actually how duplicates can actually mess up your analysis. Then the next thing we can do is let's go over to our dashboard. Then we can simply remove this. Then let's drag this over here. Now, when you look at this now, you will see that everything has automatically changed, right? Everything has automatically changed. Now, when you look at this, you see that for our small businesses, we are having 44.61% and 26.71 million. Now, let's compare it with what we have here, which is exactly what we have there. Now we can go ahead with our analysis. Now the first thing I want us to do is I want us to copy and paste this. So once we copy and paste this, I want us to move this to this place and let's make this smaller. Okay. Then we can go ahead and go to our format. Let's turn off legend and let's turn off data labels. Okay. And I also want us to go to general and turn off title and let's go to slices and let's turn off background. Okay, let's turn off background. Okay, now we have this here, right? Now the next thing I want us to do is I want us to make this a bit bigger. Then I want us to go to visual, go to slices. Now let's go down. Now let's go to spacing. I want us to increase the inner radius of this and make it this small. Okay, so it's giving me 86, but I want to make it 88. Now, I think I like it this way. Okay. Now, the next thing is, as you can see, is looking too big. So I want to resize it, okay, and make it smaller. Okay. And make it smaller. Then I will bring it back. Or I can also make it a bit bigger. Now, let me see if I make it bigger. Okay, so I can make it a bit smaller too and leave it this way, right? Now the next thing I will do is I will go over to my, let's say I want to visualize my small business first, okay, which has the highest percentage, right? Now the first thing I will do is I will go over to my format visual, then I will go over to my slices, then I will make format visual black, then the rest I will gray them out. So I will grade the rest out. I will make sure the rest are grayed out. Okay. Now I can move this down here. Now the next thing I will do is I will pick up my text box. Then I will go over to make the smaller. Then I can go over to say small business. And go over to say small business. Then I can highlight this and make it Canva.
Then I can make this 12, okay? Or I can just keep it small letters, let's say small business, right? Then I can go over to turn off the background for my text too. Then I can make this smaller, okay? Then I can also decide to make this bold, okay? Then I can also take this to the middle, okay? Then I can go over to make this smaller and I can move this right here. Then I can hold these two, then I can move this to center, okay? Now the next thing I can do is I can simply go over to this and copy this and paste it, then move this down here. Now let's look for the total amount of sales. Okay, so for this we have a total of 26.71 million. Okay, 26.71 million. That is what we have, 26.71 million. Okay, so we can make this bold so it will be more visible. So we have a total of 26.71 million. Okay, so what we do is we say 26.71, right? That was what we have, 26.71. Okay, so that is what we have here. So I can simply make this 14. Then I can change the color to, I can change the color to, let me say, let me change the color to this. Okay, I can change the color to this, then I can bold it. Okay, it's already bold. Okay, then I can remove the, I can remove the background. Okay, the background has already been removed. Okay, then I can simply move this, I can make this smaller before moving it down there. I can make this smaller, make this smaller, then I can move this to here. Okay, I can move this to here. Okay, then I can decide to move the small business a bit up. Then I can decide to move this up a bit too, okay, and make sure it is centralized. So now this is coming along, right? Now the next thing I can do is I can decide to come over here again, okay? I can decide to come over here and let me click and copy and paste. Then I can decide to move this over here, okay? Then I can decide to make this 44.61%, okay, which is the growth, total growth rate, okay, which is the total sales percentage for small business. Then I can decide to make this green, okay, I can decide to make this green, right, and make this green. Then I can decide to make this smaller. Then I can decide to make this maybe 11. Okay. Then I can decide to make this smaller. Then I can decide to move this up here. All right. But before I move it up, I want to move small business a bit up. So let me take small business up a bit. Then let me move this up a bit and make sure it is centralized, right? And then I can move this up a bit. So it shows, and make sure it's centralized too. So it shows the percentage too. So for this, I can make it to be dark green. Okay. So let's make this dark green. So we can make it dark green. Okay. So it is very visible that way. Now we can simply highlight all this. Okay. Then we can simply copy, we can simply group, okay, we can simply group all this, sorry, but before we go ahead to group, let's copy this, okay, and paste it, right? Then then we can simply go ahead to copy all this, okay, then we can simply group them and I can simply move it right here, all right? So that's it. Now the next one we have to do, we also have to do for small business. Okay, we have to do for, okay, this is for small business. So we have to do for, the next one we have to do for is for
is for government. Okay, so I think government has the next highest with 28.07%, followed by enterprise. Okay, so to do this, what we have to do is we can simply go over here. Okay, we can simply go over here, then we can copy this and paste it. Then we can move this here. Okay, then we can say government. We're creating for government, right? Yes, government. So we can say government. We can say government. Then we can make this bigger. Okay, then we can make this smaller. Then we can move this here a bit, right? For government. Now we can also decide to take this down a bit. We can decide to take this down a bit, and it's looking take it down a bit too, so it shows properly. Then we can also come over here, okay, to paste to copy this and also paste it. Then we can move this over here to say how many percent? 28.07%. So we say, okay, no, 16.81 million. So we say 16.81 million. Okay, 16.81 million. So we can make this bigger. And let's make sure this stays at the middle, maybe a bit up. Then we can simply go over to this to also we need to add million here. Okay, so people know what we are working on. So we can add M here. Okay, then we can simply make this bigger. Okay, so that looks better. Now the next thing we have to do is so we can simply make this stay at the middle. Okay, let it stay at the middle of the bit. Okay, so that's not looking well centralized, but we can just leave it that way for now. So we can simply also copy this and paste this. Okay, then we can move this here and let's say 28. Let's say 28.07%, 28.07%. Then we can move this up here. Okay, we can move this up here. Okay, and we can join this together and we can we can group and we can move here. All right, we can group and move here. Okay, now
So this is it. So this is what we actually have here now. Now the next one is we can also copy and paste. Okay. So we can call this, let's call this. So firstly, let's ungroup this. Okay. So we can simply say the next one is what? Enterprise with 22.60. So we can simply come here and say 0. Okay. So we simply come here and say 22. Okay. Then we can simply come here and say 13.54. So we say 13.54 M. Okay, then we can simply come here and say enterprise. Enterprise. Okay, then we can simply move this down. So we can simply make this smaller, make it smaller, then make this bigger, make this smaller, make this smaller. Then we can simply move this down here. Okay, then we can simply hold this, hold this, hold this, and hold this. And let's say, let's put them at the middle, put them at the center. Okay, now this looks okay. Then we can simply group this. Okay, we can simply group this and let's move this here. All right. Now the next thing we have to do also, we can simply paste and let's move this here. Then we might click and say on group. So the next one we are going to be looking at is, so we have done one, two, three. So we need to do 4 and 5. So the next one is the mid market, right? The mid market. But first, I want us to arrange in ascending order so we can see everything there. So to arrange in ascending order, what we have to do is click on these 3 dots here, then go to sort houses and say ascending. Okay, so this way we can actually see the smallest figures. Okay, now as you can see, we can see for this is for channel partners, why this is for mid market. Okay, so let's do for mid market, but first let me go ahead and just say sort by and let's say descending, because that way I can see for mid market first. So mid market here is 2.57%, why channel partner is 22.14%. So we have to do for mid market. So we come over here and say mid, okay? Then we say market, mid market, okay? Then over here we can say 2.57%. Then over here we can say 1.5%.
1.5 million. So we can say 1.54, okay, 1.54, okay. Then we can simply click on this. You can simply click on this, click on this, and click on this, then click on this, and let's align to center. Okay, we align to center. Then we can simply click on all of this and let's right click and say let's group them. Right, then we can move it right here. Okay. Now the next one we have to do, of course, we have to go ahead and copy and move right here. So the last one we are working on is for channel partners. So we can go ahead and group in an ascending order so we see channel partners clearly. So we simply have to right click and say on group. Then we go over here and say, so we simply have to right click and it's already on groups. Okay, so we go over here and say channel partners. So we say channel partners. Okay, we say channel partners, and we highlight this and let's turn this to Canva. Okay, so this is 12. Then we put this. Then the next thing we have to do is we have to go over to sale. Sales is equals to 1.28 million. Okay, 1.28 million. Then we say our percentage sales is 2.14%. Okay, now that gives us that there. Then we can simply highlight all of this, then go over to centralize it. We go over to format, then we say center. Okay, then we can go over to group. So we can go over to click this, right click and say group. So we have successfully done that. Then we can, so I want us to, so we can move this below. Okay, but before that, let's go ahead to click on this. Okay, so once we click on this, we go over to our format visual, then we go over to sliders. Okay, now we have to go over to government, then we make government black, then we make this grayed out. Okay, then we do the same for channel partners, for enterprise, sorry. We do the same for enterprise. We do the same for enterprise. So we go over to format visual, then we go over to slice it. So we grade this out, then we go over to enterprise and turn it to black. Now we do the same for mid market. So we go over to format visuals, then we go over to slices, then we go over to grade this out, then we go over to mid market and turn it to black. So we do the same for channel partners. So we go over to format visuals, then we go over to slices. So we grade this out and turn channel partners to black. So that gives us what we had here. Now we need to try fitting this into this, because if we try, let's say, sorry, so we need to try fitting this into this. So let's say we want to make this smaller. This will actually mess up what we have. Okay, so let's make this bigger. So the problem we will have now is actually how to fit this into the, okay. Now we have to try to make this bigger. Okay, let's try to make this bigger. Okay, so let's try to push this up right here. Okay, let's try to push this up right here. So let's try to also push this up right here. So let's try to push this up right here. So let's also try to push this up right here. So we actually have to highlight this together and let's right click and say. So we also have to move this up right here. So let's try moving this here now, see if it works. So till it doesn't actually work. Okay, it doesn't actually work. So we were actually supposed to make this a bit smaller. Okay, so this we are supposed to be a bit smaller. Now this is going to mess up the visual. But the most important thing that you have gotten the logic, you've understood how this is created. So we can just leave this here for now. Okay, now let's just go over to this place and let's go over to remove this. Right, now let's go over to our dashboard. Now, the next thing we have to achieve is the KPI cards. Okay, we also have to achieve the KPI cards. Now, to achieve the KPI cards, what we have to do is, so we go over to pick up our card visual, okay? Then we go over to move our total sales to feet, okay? Then we can make this smaller, right? We can make this smaller. We can make this smaller.
Then we can go over to click on our format visuals. Then let's turn off our total cells. Then let's go over to general. Let's turn off background. Now we can make this, we can leave this right here. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to go ahead and insert our column, clustered column charts. Okay. So let's insert our cluster column charts. Okay. So we can make this smaller. Then what we have to do is we move our total cells to our y-axis. Then we move our month name. Okay. So we open our date timetable and move our month name right here. No, sorry. We move our month name to our x-axis. Now this gives us the bar chart we have under our KPI. Now we can simply go over to formats and we turn off this, then we go over to our y-axis, we turn off the title in our x-axis, also go over to our y-axis and turn off the title in our y-axis, then we go over to our general, we turn off title, then we can go over to our visual, okay, then we go over to columns, then we make it black. Now the next thing we are going to do is we are going to be reducing this, okay? So what we have to do is we go over to our channel, our category label. So we go to our core add value, then let's reduce this, okay? So we can reduce it to as low as 30, okay? Or we can even reduce it to 29. Or let's just reduce it to 25. So reduce it to 25, okay? So we leave it this way for now, so we can easily make it smaller, okay? We can make it smaller, then we just move it here. Now the next thing we have to do is let's go ahead and pick our rectangle. So we go over to insert, then we'll pick our rectangle and we click on this. So we can actually make this smaller, so we can create our KPI card with that. So we can make this smaller. So we make this smaller. So we'll move this up a bit so we can take this down a bit. Then let's make this longer. Okay. Then the next thing we can do is we can go over to formatting this. So for this, we can simply turn off, we can simply turn off, we can simply change background to white. Okay. Then we can simply turn off border. Okay. Then we can simply turn on shadow. So for our shadow, we can make it 93. So let's save this. Now let's go over to our dashboard to see what we actually have there. So, okay, we have, this is looking a bit longer and bigger. So, and I don't think we actually applied shadow there. So I'm going to click on this and I'll make it a bit bigger. Okay. I'll make it a bit bigger, then I can move it up a bit, then I can make it a bit longer, right? Then I can simply go over to my style and let me turn off shadow. Then I can simply go over to shape and let me make this a bit rounded. Okay, let me make it a bit rounded, like let's say 7. Okay, now let's add back our border. Okay, so we can go over and make the border a bit light. So let's make it light, like something like this. Okay, now that's making sense. Then we can go over to pick our total sales figure. So we can actually put it right here. Okay, we can put it right here. So we can say Control Z. Okay. So we can move that up again. Then we can simply go over to our formats and let's say align. Let's say bring to front. Okay, so we'll bring to front. Then we can simply take this up there. We can simply take this up there. So we have to remove the background. So we go over to general, then let's turn off background. So after turning off background, we can simply move this over here. Okay, we can simply move this over here. So sorry, let's say Control C. So this comes out to here, right? So we can simply move this over here. Okay. So to do that, we have to go over to format and let's bring that to front. Okay, let's bring that to front. So we bring that to front. So we can simply move this to this place. Okay, we can simply move this to this place, or we can simply move this to this place. Or another thing we can do is to actually turn this, but I feel like I'm liking it the way it is, so I'm going to leave it this way, right? I'm going to leave it this way. Sorry. So I say Control Z. So I'm just going to leave it exactly this way. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is let's achieve our, we can copy and paste this. So the next thing we have to do is let's achieve our total profits. Okay, our total profits. Now to do that, what we have to do is we go over to our KPI card. So instead of going over to create a new KPI card entirely, we can simply come over here. Okay, we can simply come over here. Let's say we want to move this down a bit. So we can simply come over here. Let's make this smaller. Let's make this smaller. So we can simply come over here. Then let's click on this and let's say Control C, Control V. Then let's move this down here. Then we can simply move this up again. Then the next thing we can do is we can simply go over to our values, right? We go over to our feeds, then we remove our total sales. Then let's move our profits down here. So this gives us our profits, our total profits. So we can actually move this up here. Okay, but before we move it up there, we can simply duplicate it. Okay, then let's move it here again. Then we can simply take this down, right? Then the next thing we can do again is simply go over here, copy and paste this too. Okay. So once we copy and paste it, then we can simply take it down to here. Okay, we can simply take it here. Then the next thing we can do is we go over to our sales, total sales, then we move over our profits. Okay, now this gives us our profits column. So the next thing we have to achieve, of course, we have to achieve our total. So let's check the next thing we have to achieve. Okay, so our total profits, we actually made use of a line. Okay, we made use of a line. So we have to go back to here. And for our total profits, we just click on it, right? We click on our total profits, then we go over to make use of a line chart. Okay, we can go over to make use of a line chart. Okay, then we can go over to our so I'll go over to our lines, then let's make our line black. So we say line colors, then we make it black. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is let's go ahead and copy this. Okay. So we go ahead and copy this, then we can we can simply say Control C, Control V, then we can actually put this down here. Okay. We can actually put this down here, right? Then the next thing we have to do is this will be for our total discount column. So, but before we go ahead to do that, let's pick up our test two. Okay. So right here, let's say total sales. So total sales. So we can actually make this smaller. Then we can make this shorter. Okay. Then we can highlight this and let's turn this to Canberra. Then we can make this 12. Okay. Then we can make this bold, right? We can make this bold. So the next thing we have to do is we can simply go ahead and click on this, make it smaller, then we can move this here. Okay. So we can move this here. So it shows total sales. Okay. Total sales. Or we can also, let's move this down. Okay. So let's first of all arrange what we are working on here. So we can, sorry, we can say Control Z. So we can move this right here. Okay. So let's move this here, right? We can move this here. So the next thing we can do is, this is looking okay here, right? So we can simply click on this and change the color. So let's say we want to change the color to, let's say we change it to blue, okay? So that makes more sense. Then we can actually increase it to, let's say 14. So it shows clearly. Then right here, we can make it a bit wider, okay? Then for here, we can actually move this down here, right? We can move this down here, okay? Now we can actually do the same thing for total profits. So of course we pick up our text tool and we say total profits. Then we can simply highlight this and turn it to Canberra. So we can simply make this 16. Then we can bold this. Then we can go over to, sorry. So we make this 16 and we bold it. Okay. So we can also go over to, so this was 14. So let's try making it 16 and see. So let's try making it 16. Okay, then let's make this here. So I think 16 looks much better. Okay, looks much better. So we can simply make this a bit smaller. Okay, then we can simply go over to effects and let's turn off background. So we can also make this smaller. Then we can also move this over here. Okay, so this is our total profits, right? So this is our total profits. But before we move it down there, so let's just increase this and let's change color to blue. Okay, let's change color to blue. So we can move it down here and this is our total profits. Okay, this is our total profits, or we can simply move it down. So we can simply move it down. So that's our total profit, right? Now, the next thing we can do is we can go ahead to calculate our total sales, our total discount amount. So what we have to do is we just go ahead to copy and paste this. Then we can move this down, okay? Then we can simply come over to our card visual. Then we remove our total sales and let's look for our total discount amount. So total discount, then let's drag it to the feeds. Okay. So we can actually move this. We can actually move this. We can actually go over here. Then let's copy and paste this. Then let's drag this down. And let's call this total discounts. Total discounts. Then the next thing we can do is we can make this larger. Okay, so total discounts. So we can actually move this over here. We can move this over here. Then we can pick this and move this. Okay, sorry. We're supposed to bring to front. So the next thing we have to do is we simply have to click and move this over here. Okay, we move this over here. Then we go over to format and let's bring it to front. So we have to bring it to front. Okay. Now the next thing we can do is we say discount, total discounts. Okay. Total discounts. Then we can actually pick this and move it over here. Okay. Or we can simply make it smaller. Then we'll make it this way and let's move it over here. So we can make this smaller. Then we simply just move it over here. Okay. We simply move it over here. Now, the next thing we can do is we can pick up this discount, those particular bar charts. Then let's remove our total sales and let's drag our discounts into it, our total discount into it. Okay, we drag our total discount into it. Then we can then move this up here, right? But before we move this up here, we have to move this up a bit. We have to move this up a bit. Okay. Then we can also make this smaller because we can make this 14. Sorry. We can make this 14. So this can be 14. Then this can also be 14. So this can also be 14. Then this can also be 14. This can also be 14, right? Then for this, we can simply push, sorry, you can say Control Z. Then for this, we can actually just click on this, make it a bit smaller. Then let's move it up a bit. Okay. So let's see. So it shows total discounts. Okay. Shows total discounts, or we can even simply keep it here. Doesn't matter where it is kept. The most important thing is that it's passing the information. Okay, now when we move it here, it's actually looks like keeping it here would have been better. So let's move it over here. Right? So let's move it over here. Then we can simply move this here. Okay. So we can simply move this here. So let's move it in here a bit. Okay. Now we have successfully handled that. Now we can simply, another thing we can do is we can reduce the bar charts. Okay. So we can reduce the bar charts a bit. So it doesn't look like it is overshadowing our KPI. So we can also reduce this a bit. Okay. So we can also, for uniformity, we can drag this down. We can move it down a bit so it's as low as this. So we move it down again. So it's similar to what we have here, right? Then for this line chart, we can also make it go down a bit. Then I think for this we can simply pick this and move it over here. Okay. Then for this we can also pick this and move it over here. So we can pick this and move it over here. Okay. So, or we can leave this here. Doesn't really matter. Okay. So for this one, we can pick it and move it here. Okay, so we can move it here, right? So this is it. Now we can simply try to group all this together. So we can group all this together. So let's group everything together. So we can simply right click and say group. Okay. Then for these two, we can do the same thing for this. We can do the same thing, or we can just simply, okay, join everything together. Then we can simply right click. So we can simply right click and say group. Okay. So we can also do the same for this, just drag everything together. Okay, then we can right click and we can say group. Okay, so we have successfully grouped that. Then we can simply hold these together and let's go over to our format. So let's say align. So let's align to middle. Okay. Then let's also align vertically and let's align horizontally. Okay. So we did not align horizontally. So we have to go over to align horizontally. So we go over to format align vertically. Okay. So we have successfully aligned that. So let's go back to our dashboard. Now, the next thing we have to do is achieve this, right? We are going to achieve this, but for now, we are just going to leave it at this for now. So we are going to go back to achieve that. So let's just go over to our card and let's just click on this. Okay. So let's click on this. So let's go over to our columns. Okay, not our let's go to our columns. Okay. So let's take this down. So let's say see all. Okay, turn on see all. Then we can go over to make this green. Okay. So we can go over to make this green. Okay, that's for all. Then for this, I want to make this red. Okay, I want to make this red. Then for the rest, I want to make this black. Then for December, I just want to make this green. So I want to make this green for December. Okay. Now that's coming along. So the next thing we have to do is we do the same for this. So for this, we can simply try making this a bit bigger, right? Can try making this a bit bigger. Then we can go over to our format visuals, then click on our columns. Then let's take this down. So let's click on turn on see all. So for October, which is the highest month we have, let's go over to make this green. Then for May, let's go over to make this red. Now this gives us what we are trying to achieve. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we are still going to work on these KPI cards because they're not looking very cool to me. So, but let's go ahead for now. So the next thing we have to do is we have to achieve this line chart here and this right here. Now to do that, what we have to do is we have to simply click on this, copy and paste it. Okay, then we can move this down here. All right, then we can move this down here, then we can move this down a bit, then we can move this down, right? We can move this down, then we can move this up a bit. Okay, now we can also copy and paste this, then we can move this down here. Okay, then we can make this smaller, so we can make this smaller. Okay, now that makes sense, so we can actually move this up a bit, then we can also move this up, make it a bit bigger. Okay, then we can make sure they are on the same line, right? So the next thing we have to do is we go ahead and pick up our line chart. Okay, so we simply go ahead to make this fit into what we want to where we want to place it. Okay, then we make it fit in. So once we have made the line chart to fit our placeholder, so what we have to do is let's drag our cells to our x axis, and let's drag our profits to our y axis. Then let's go over to our dim products. Let's go over to our dim products. Okay, so dim products, so we can drag our dim products to our legend. Okay, we can drag our dim product to our legend. Now this is not what I'm trying to achieve. As you can see, I made use of the wrong diagram here. Okay, the wrong visual. So what I'm trying to achieve is I was trying to achieve a scatter plot, not a line chart. So what I have to do is I simply go over to the scatter plot and click scatter plot. So another thing I want us to do is we have to go over to our size. Now let's look for our cells. Okay, let's look for our cells, and let's place our cells in the size. Okay, so as you can see, I feel like something is actually off. Okay, so what I will do is I will take out these cells from my values. Okay, and I'll take out the profits. Okay, now what I will do is I'm going to move these cells to my x-axis. Okay, then I'm going to move my profits to my y-axis. So my profit, I'm going to move it to my y-axis. Now this makes more sense. Then I will go over to my format visual. Then I will go over to general. Then I will go over to turn off header, and I will turn off background. I will turn off title, and I will go over to effects and turn off background. Okay, then I will leave that at that. All right, you can simply even decide to make this smaller. Okay, make this smaller so I have enough space to actually write whatever I'll be writing up here, but I can simply enlarge it. Okay, now I can leave that at that. Now the next thing we have to achieve is we have to go over to achieve this bar charts over here. Okay, now to do that we have sales growth percentage by country. Okay, now to do that what we have to do is we go over to our bar chart, to our desktop, sorry, then we click on our clustered bar charts. Okay, then we can simply make this smaller, then we can simply move it into this place, then we can bring it down a bit, then we can make it broad, sorry, so Ctrl Z, so we can make this broad. Okay, so we make this broad and we can move this here a bit. Now we are going to be clicking on this, then we go over to our x axis. So we in our x-axis, what we have to do is go over to dim country, okay, dim country, then we drag our country to our x-axis, okay. Then once we have dragged our country to our x-axis, the next thing we have to do is go over to our y-axis and drag our, what are we comparing? So we drag our sales growth. So I think we calculated our sales growth already. So sales growth percentage, so we drag it to the y-axis. Now this gives us this here. Now what we have to do is, let's go ahead and format this. So first of all, the first thing is turn off the title, then we turn off background, then we can go over to visual, okay. So once we are in visual, the next thing we have to do is, let's go over to our columns, okay. Then let's move this down and let's turn on all. So once all is turned on, the next thing we have to do is, let's go over to France and let's make it green. Then let's go over to Germany and let's make it red. And then let's go over to default and let's make it black. Now this makes more sense, correct? Now we can simply move this up a bit if we want to. Then this is it. Okay. Now the next thing we have to achieve is, let's just copy this, okay, and paste. So the next thing we have to achieve is, of course, we have to achieve our map, okay. We have to achieve our map. So I feel like we can still move this to make it a bit wider. So we can move this and make it a bit wider too. So while here we can use it for the map, so we can move this up, and even we can decide to move this a bit closer, okay. Then for our visuals, we can decide to move this and make it wider, okay. Then for this, we can also decide to move this and make it wider, okay. Now before we move ahead, I want us to have a consistent font. So what we have to do is, we'll click on this, okay. So once we click on this, what we have to do is go over to our format visuals. Then let's go over to our general, okay. And let's go back to visual. Now let's go over to our x-axis and let's go over to values and let's change this to Canberra. So we change this to Canberra. Now the next thing we have to do is, we can close here, then go over to our y-axis, go over to values, and let's also change this to Canberra. Let's change this to Canberra. Okay. Now the next thing we can do is, okay, so the next thing we can do is, we can also do the same for this. So we can change this to Canberra. Okay. Then we can also go over to the y-axis and change it to Canberra. Okay. Now that looks much better to me. Now the next thing we have to achieve is, we have to achieve the, let's go over to this. Now we have to achieve the indicator, the sales indicator over here. Oops. Now you see, we actually made a huge mistake here. We created our sales indicator in the wrong place. Now if we go ahead to visualize our sales indicator, this is not going to work, okay, because we created it, the table we created it is not connected to the sales table, so this is not going to work. So we are supposed to create the indicator the measure for the indicator in the financials where we have our sales column. Okay, so this is not going to work. Okay, and the thing we have to do now is we have to go ahead and delete this. Okay, we have to delete this. So we have to delete this. Okay, but before that, let's just go ahead and copy this. This is our sales indicator. So let's go over to financials. Okay, so let's go over to our sales indicator first. So we have to delete from model and we say yes. Okay, so we have to go over to our financials to create our sales indicator where we have our sales table. So we go over to financials, click on financials. Then we can go over to model. So we can go over to new measure. Then we can simply paste this. So we can simply paste this. Then we can say okay. Then we can simply move this now. Okay. So let's go ahead and save this. Now the next one we have to work on is our sales indicator color. But before we work on our sales indicator color, we have to work on our sales status. Okay, so we go ahead to copy this, then let's go back and let's delete this from the model. So we delete from the model, we say yes. So as you can see, this is actually giving us, highlighting that there is an error here, and that's because we did not create our sales status before creating our sales indicator. So that's not a problem. Once we create our sales indicator, it's actually going to go back. So as you can see, it's showing sales status cannot be determined. So we just leave that. Once we create our sales status, it's actually going to reflect. So what we have to do is go over to new measure. Okay, so once we go over to new measure, we can simply paste those here. So we can simply okay this now. So we simply okay that and wait for that to load. So we can simply go back. Now when you go back to look at our sales indicator, as you can see that it is no longer showing red because we have successfully created our sales status. Okay, now the next thing we have to do is go ahead and create our sales indicator color. Okay, sales indicator color. So the first thing we have to do is, let's first of all delete it from this date table. So we delete from model and let's say yes. Okay, so wait for that to delete. So after deleting that, the next thing we have to do is let's go over to our total, let's go over to our financials. Okay, so we can just click anywhere on the financials, then we go over to new measure. Okay, then we can paste our sales indicator color DAX function. So we simply say Ctrl V, then we can simply say okay. Now we can simply go ahead to create our indicator. Now to do that, what we have to do is let's drag our sales indicator, okay, to the fields. No, please. We have to first of all make sure we are clicked on our card. So once we have clicked on our card, then we can drag our sales indicator to the fields. Now this shows us our sales indicator, right? Now let's go ahead and see if that works. So as you can see that when we actually try changing this color, okay, as you can see, this is not actually working. And the reason is because we have not actually set up the conditional formatting in Power BI. So what we need to do, we actually have to click on this, then we go over to format, then we go over to call out value, okay, then we go over to, no, we go over to, let's go back to call out value and let's go over to FX. Okay. Now let's click on this. Let's say fit value and let's say sales indicator. So sales indicator color. Then we say okay. Now as you can see, this has updated. Now when we click on this,
When we click on this, so you see it has actually updated. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is, okay, we can simply go ahead to move this and make this smaller. Then we can simply move this here. Okay, we can simply move this here. So I think this is cutting out, so we can make it a bit bigger. So yes, so we have actually achieved that. So one thing you need to know is that this dashboard doesn't need to be perfect as the one I created first, but the most important thing is understanding the logic and understanding how everything was actually built. So when you're actually recreating this, you can make it to be as beautiful as you want it to be. But the most important thing is knowing how the analysis was done and how every step was actually carried out. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go over to now we have to go over to creating our map. So to do that, we have to go over to our tutorial material and let's move down here. Then what we have to do is we have to copy this link. Now this takes us to my GitHub URL. So where I actually have the repository, so we can actually go ahead and download this. Okay. Now what you have to do is you just have to click on this. So once you click on this, you simply go over to download. Okay, now this will download that. So what we have to do is we go over to Power BI. So once we go over to Power BI, we go over to insert our shape map. Okay, so once we insert our shape map, we can actually make this a bit bigger, right? We can make this a bit bigger. Okay, then the next thing we have to do is we go over to Fill. Okay, our format panel. But before we go over to our format panel, we have to drag in our country. So we drag our country in. So let's drag this to location. Okay. So for color saturation, we make use of our total cells. Okay, for color saturation. Now the next thing we have to do is let's go over to our formats visual. Then we click on our map setting. Then over here we click on custom map. Then over here we can browse. So once we browse, we click on we select the file we just downloaded and say okay. Now this opens up this way, right? Now the next thing we have to do is we can make this a bit bigger. Okay, we can make this a bit bigger. So the next thing we have to do is we can also bring this down a bit. Okay. Now to give it that shape, we go over to protection and say orthographic. Now this gives it the word map shape. Then we can go over to our map setting. Okay, then we say fill color. So we say minimum should be red and maximum should be green. Okay, maximum should be green. Then the next thing we can say is we go over to blank areas and we say blank area should be black. Okay. Now this shows that blank area should be black. So this shows it right there. Okay. Now let's turn on gradients and see. So center should be dark green. Okay. Now let's just leave center at yellow. So let's say light yellow. Then we can say okay. All right. So we can turn off gradients. Then for blank spaces, we left it as white, as black. Okay, so what else do we need to do? I think that's all for now. Now, when you look over this, you will find out that there are some, we have France here, we have Germany, then over here is Canada, okay, and we have United States, okay. But now, when you look at our United States, you see that our United States is not having any figure. Our United States is showing blank. Now, that is because of in this world map, United States was written as United States, but in our data set, we have United States as United States of America. So what we have to do is we have to go over to our financials, then we click on these three dots, then we click on edit query. So once we get over to our financials, we click on country, then we click on replace values. Then we are going to replace United States of America to United States, to United States. Then we can say OK. Then we can close this and apply. So you know that according to, remember when I was explaining duplicates and reference, so you know that whatever changes we make here, we effect on our dim country, right? So we can go over to close and apply. Then wait for Power BI to apply the changes. Now, as you can see, our United States is actually showing. So our United States is actually showing. So we have our Canada, our United States, and all the states we actually have here. Okay. Now the next thing we can do is we can go ahead to start adding the text. Okay. Now to do that, what we do have to do is we can pick our text tool and we can simply make this smaller. Okay. Now we can simply make this bigger and we can simply make this bigger and we can say we can call this country map. So what did we use here? Let's go back to this and see. So what we use? We say map showing total sales by country. So we say map showing totals total sales by country. Then we can highlight this and let's change this to Canberra and let's change this to 11. Let's make this 12. Then we go over to effect and let's turn on background. Then we can make this smaller. We can make this smaller. Okay. Then we can bring this over here, right? Then one thing we need to do is we can say Ctrl Z. So we can bring that text to the front, right? So we can simply say format, then bring to front. So one thing we need to do is we have to turn off background for this. So we turn off background and also turn off title. So this makes more sense. Now the next thing we have to do is we can simply move this to this place. Okay. So we can simply move this to this place. So it shows map showing this. Then we can also copy this and paste it. Then we can move this to here. And this says, we can say, we can call this total, total sales profit by products. Okay. So that is okay. Then for this, we can say Control V. So for this, we can simply say sales growth. So we can simply say sales growth percentage by country. Okay. Now we can also come over to say Control V again. So we can move this to here. So we do not have much space here. So please remember when you're creating your own dashboard, please make this a bit smaller so it can be sufficient for here. So what we can do here is, so we can just keep this here. And even though it doesn't suit there, but we can just say countries by total sales summary. So we can simply say countries by total sales summary. Total sales summary. Okay. So that is it. So this should go down enough to so this can actually enter here. So that's how you should create your space. Then what else? I think this is the end of the tutorial. This is the end of the tutorial. So please, if you have any question or if you have any addition, or if you feel like there was something I missed out on, please do not forget to leave a comment below. And also don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like and share. Thank you so much for watching.